Okay, it is 7:01 p.m. Central Standard Time and Tuesday, October the 26th, 2021. And welcome to week four. 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 That's it. You know what that means? That means we are in the second half of the course. And that also means that the course will be over in 2 weeks. And it also means for those of you in this class who will know, and I'll remind you that we have one more lecture to go, and that will be week 5 next week. So next week will be quite a busy one for me because this class has no week 6 lecture, and then the course ends actually 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today, this course will be over. So um, it is very important for you to get those assignments in on time, and you know, also pay attention to the notes that I've given you for each of the assignments for weeks 1 and for weeks 2. And again, as I remind students, follow the rubric very carefully and make sure that if you have any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And at this juncture, the best way to reach me is by text message or by telephone, one or the other. And it's very, very, very important for you to be aware of that. 630-660-8480 gets you right here. And I have this phone with me everywhere I go. Okay. So let's get into the swing, finish strong. So now let me share my screen. Okay, this is the one I want to share. Here it is. And we're going to start with the calendar, of course, to remind you of where we are. Let's move that, put it in the month view. The live lecture is taking place right now. Today, as I said, is the 26th. Your initial post is due tonight. Your reply post is due Saturday the 30th. And your written assignments, the last live classroom phrase that will come out of tonight's lecture, the quiz, and the written assignment will all be due by the 31st. By the 31st. All right. Notice that Monday of next week is the 1st. And then, of course, we have a lecture, of course, on Tuesday. But here's what I want to show you. The 9th. That's it. The course absolutely ends on the 9th because on the 10th, Module 2 starts and new courses will start. So some of you I hope to see next term. I think at this juncture I'm teaching drugs and crime, and I'm not sure. They're going to try to put constitutional law over there again, but I think it's going to end up with something else. But anyway, the course ends on the 9th. It ends on the 9th. Very clear. I know some students say, why do you always spend time in the lecture doing it? I have reasons. I've been doing this for a while, and I have students that even miss it then. So let's go back. Let's look at the announcement. And here we are for week 4. And we're dealing with prisoner rights and evolution of probation. And to prepare for the assignment, chapters 8 and 9 of the textbook, I've provided you with the PowerPoints to assist you in preparing for the exam and also to help you to understand the module in a quick fashion. And we're going to deal with the activities, the law of corrections and prisoner rights, Bill of Rights and community supervision, corrections, law and prisoner rights activity, sentencing sanctions, and then vocabulary view, and then the evolving role of the probation officer will kind of be something that I will glean over that you'll be able to take a look at. The discussion assignment, intermediate sanction. I already told you the due date, but I'll repeat it, is tonight, 11:59 p.m. CST, and that stands for Central Standard Time, and Saturday, 11:59 p.m. And then Sunday, the next day, which is the 31st, probation officer, the written assignment, and we'll talk about that, and the quiz itself, which we don't go over because if I click on it, it shows the quiz, but you know now how it works. You know, you have 3 opportunities to do it before 11:59 p.m. On this Sunday. And then complete the mid-quarter student survey. Uh, so see how things are going in this course. One of the main things that I keep stressing over and over and over, it's so important for you to understand the information in the module. And I used to not cover the sections that you should read, and students would ask me if I could because it merits some clarification. Then could I put some meat on those bones? And that's what I try to do. I try not to do it word for word, but there are some words I take that are very important and get right to the heart of it, and I will share those with you. And then the other thing is that, of course, you know, when your grades are due, for me, Friday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and you have gotten them every time since we've started on time. And the feedback is in the rubric of, and not too many of you have reached out to me about that, so maybe you understand that. Motto: adversity is the springboard to success. Finish strong. That's where we are at this particular point. Let's do this. All right, and that's the announcement for the week. Okay, let's move this up here. So let's get right into prisoner rights and the evolution of probation. Now, as you recall, when I told you when the course first started, I told you that this course would deal with um, 4 areas, 4 areas. And I told you it would deal with prisons, which we will deal with tonight, and we dealt with some last week. Probation, which we're going to be dealing with tonight. Parole, and those are the 4. So it's jails, prisons, probation, parole. Those are the topics that are involved here. All right. So let's delve into the written assignment first. So here's a very straightforward assignment, good people. First of all, number 1, it is not a PDF. It is not a Word document. And oh, by the way, some of you who submitted the very first assignment incorrectly, that did resubmit it, and it hasn't been graded, don't be alarmed, because before we get to the end of the course, I have to go back and scrub each of the weeks. What that means is I go back and I see if anybody submitted any late assignments, and all of those who submitted that week 1 assignment in the form that was incorrect, I will not take points on them submitting the correct version. I will take points off for, not for lateness, but for the content of the material. So be aware of that. So you're going to use this scenario, and it's a very real scenario. And you're a new person, and we're going to discuss the what's called evidence-based practices. And so you, as a probation officer, are going to provide um, information about how probation officers work. That's pretty much what you're going to be doing. Okay. So you're going to create an announcement. It's going to be double spaced, people. It's going to have citations in the body to support, not just references. I say it every week, and there are people who still insist on references and no citations, which leads me to believe either they don't listen to the lecture for the content, but just listen to it to get the key phrase. But the point of the matter is, it is very important for you to understand that concept, because it makes a difference. When it says, jumping down to point number 4, provide supporting evidence from credible sources. That means citations in the body and references at the end. It's APA with a cover page. So you're going to create the announcement that includes a summary of the continuing of duties that probation officers perform. You're going to describe 4 roles of a probation officer. There are more than that, but at least 4. Again, cite your sources. Include specific examples of what the probation officer is required to do in fulfilling these roles, such as surveillance, broker of services, liaison of the court, change agent intervention. Those are the 4 things right there. So you're going to use this announcement to get this done. Now, to put some meat on it, let's get to the column that I want you to focus on. Which column do I want you to focus on? Type in the chat box. I will see it. What is it? Which chat? I mean, which column? Okay, but what's it called? No, it's not called 100%. It's not called advanced. It's right there in front of you. Yes, mastery. Yeah, when you advanced, you were reading it, but mastery is the column. Mastery is the column name. Subtitle this: proficiency, competence, and emerging. Mastery, mastery. And that's why I have you to, you can't see the small text very well. Okay. Yeah, I hear you. I know what you're talking about. These old eyes had to get a bigger screen. That's why when it looks like I'm looking up, I'm not really looking up. I have my laptop down here, which is where on my desk, where my camera is, but right up above it, I have a big screen, a big monitor, and that's what I use. So because of the same reason you said. So mastery, very, very, very important. I want you to think like that. And I want you to think like that as a habit, because it develops good work ethic, which produces into a bright future after school. And that's what I did. A student made a comment in the student survey last term that they really didn't like the fact that I graded them as if they were professionals. I laughed at it because I said, well, when you want me to grade you as if you're not professionals? Um, do you want me to give you a break? Yeah, I give you a break. However, I'm not going to uh, just give you a disservice by giving you a higher grade when you didn't satisfy the requirements, because that's a bad habit to have. You won't, someone will stop you from progressing. Who is that? You. And that's just kind of like the way that I am. So I think that I must know how to do it because I did it to make it this far. And I teach what I know. And I'm not going to teach you below. That's why I tell you, don't ask me how to get a C or a D in my class. You don't have to ask me that. But if you ask me to help you, I'll come back to this. I said, let's work with the mastery column every time. And if you miss it, it's okay. It's okay. 90% is not bad. Even 80 is not. But when you start to get to the 70s, and definitely when the 60s and below, then we got an issue there. So anyway, um, so you're going to summarize uh, an exemplary summary of the continuing of probation officer duties, of the duties that probation officers do with thorough supporting evidence from credible sources. It says it all the way down. Describe each role. Uses the word exemplary of description of each role, each of the roles, with thorough supporting evidence from credible sources. Then finally, examples of the work, exemplary examples with thorough supporting evidence from credible sources. Please do it double space. Please do it double space. I say it over and over and someone submits it single space. And again, it is a Word document. And then the last part, it deals with errors and spelling and stuff like that. We already talked about the APA aspects of it. But look at what happens when you don't have credible sources to describe the role, examples, uh, and summary. Look at what happens. I can't put you in here if you don't have any. You jump all the way over to here. Missing, missing, missing. That's the difference in this and this or this. But the difference in this and this is you give basic stuff just to get me over, get the assignment out of the way. Don't think like that. You want to be out front. Okay. Any questions or anything need clarified at this time? Please, when I ask that question, type it in the chat box. That does not mean that you can't come back later, but if something occurs to you now, because it might be something that you say or ask that can benefit not just you, but another classmate. Anything? Any questions? Okay. All right. So I like the response always that I see from some students. It's so good so far. So usually that lasts until they see the grade and they get it. If you do it all the way that I gave it to you, you will make it every time. I promise you, you will. Because it's just a checkbox. And you know what else? Rubrics are good because they take away I analyze what you read, right? I read them. I read it. And I'm looking to see that you cover the points. But here's what I'm saying is that when I check a box, I'm checking it because it is where the content of the paper that you submitted. So you're the one who can determine what your actual grade is. Um, and I just follow what you give out. So, all right, the discussion assignment gives you a scenario. Again, remember, it's pretty much about probation tonight. And remember that probation pretty much does. Wait a minute, I'm going to ask you: does probation deal with jails pretty much, or with prisons? Not really, Andrew. It's one or the other. Because what deals with prisons, not probation? What's the other P? Yeah, parole. Remember the difference. With probation, you either you spend time in jail, which means you either committed an offense that was less than a year or a misdemeanor, or you end up at the time that you arrested or plead guilty, the crime level is reduced or set so that the judge can say probation. When they say probation, what they're saying is that they're going to let you out of jail. You will not go to the next step, which would be prison, and you will serve your time outside. So it gives you a second chance. And they also, with probation, just so you know, it gives you an opportunity sometimes to come out with no conviction. I worked in an organization when I was a practicing attorney called Probation Challenge. And what we did in Probation Challenge is we dealt with individuals who came before this particular judge, R. Eugene Pincham, who was my mentor. Judge Pincham, along with his probation officer, um, Reverend Harold Bailey, they set out a program that if under the law you qualified for probation for the offense that you plead guilty to or that you're found guilty, and you then qualify to go to jail, if you did not have your GED, General Educational Diploma, he would give you the opportunity to say, I will go after my GED. If you did complete your GED while out on probation, so remember, you're not in jail, while out on probation, you would then come back before the judge after you get your GED, and the judge would say, charges are dismissed. And the reason why is because that's one of the remedies or things that we discovered that will help individuals, and that it is definitely, you hear me say this over and over, it is cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. Because when you educate, you don't have to feed, shelter those individuals. What you do is you provide services so that they can learn to take care of themselves, so that you can take them from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. When I say from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, do you know what I'm talking about in my class? You guys know? Remember that? Okay. So that you are going in another direction in life, so that you this is a form of rehabilitating the individual and cutting into recidivism and overcrowdedness, obviously. So anyway, that's what that program is all about. So with probation, uh, the other thing is that we also want to provide vocational skills for individuals, um, and you find yourself working directly with the individual and their families, and to help them get jobs. There are second chance programs, And then those who have drug problems. Of course, education might be a part of the issue that we deal with, but the biggest part we would deal with was getting that person the help that they need to kick that habit, whether it's drugs or alcohol. And if they have mental issues, then we want to also get them treatment for that as well. Okay, so that's what you do in probation. Back to parole, it means then that you have been sentenced to jail. I'm sorry, to prison, which means it's going to be a year or more for the crime. That's what the sentence says. And depending on whether it's determinate or indeterminate sentencing, will determine when you are released. So, and the parole board decides um, to release you and not the judge. So that's why I made the statement correcting you to say that it is not both in probation. They're two separate animals, and you want to get yourself cleared. Once you come out on parole, by the way, the only way you can have a clear record then is if there is a pardon by the governor or the high elected official. Usually it's the governor. Okay. So anyway, um, these are the factors that you're going to involve yourself with. Okay. So in your initial post, you're going to explain the intermediate sanction. Um, and we're going to discuss intermediate sanctions. I already discussed one already, and that's education. And the other, uh, I mentioned those two, dealing with the drugs, alcohol, and so forth. Support the sanction selection, telling why you selected it, include problems with the sanction. So, because as you can see here, Pat has a problem here with alcoholism. Okay. And that's his big problem. So he needs what I talked about earlier. All right. So the key thing is to get him some help with that. Okay. Any questions about the discussion assignment? I've already started into the lecture. Okay. So now let's move into dealing specifically with, of course, you have the quiz and these things here. So let's talk about the law of corrections and prisoner rights. And so what we're really doing here is just simply laying a legal foundation for you so you're aware of a working knowledge and understand the sources that are used to formulate the law and the rights of individuals who are prisoners. So we start with the United States Constitution, and it sets out the governmental framework for the entire country. As you know, it has three branches in it. You have the executive, which is led by the president. You have the legislative, which consists of the House and the Senate. The House consists of 435 members. The Senate consists of 100 members so far. And then the last branch is the Supreme Court, the judiciary, who interpret the laws. The United States Supreme Court consists of how many members? How many members? How many members on the Supreme Court? How many members on the Supreme Court? 9. 9 so far. 9 members. That's why you see a lot of, quote, 5-4 decisions. 9. Sometimes you have 7-2. Sometimes you have um, 6 to 1, and that's 7. But then you'll have some dissenters or concurring individuals who might agree with the decision, but for different reasons. So there's 9. Don't ever forget that. Remember, it's 9 so far. It's been 9 since I've known the Supreme Court have been established and studying it. Okay. So we deal with statutes, as I said, that are passed by the legislature, and then the case law resulting from what we call stare decisis or judge-made law, where interpretation of the statutes and application of the Constitution is brought in cases. And so on the federal level, there is always a constitutional question. There has to be a constitutional question that takes place. And then finally, the last part is kind of not informal, but state, federal, and local administrative agencies set up an agency for the executive branch to implement the policies of that agency, such as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the um, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. These are all where regulations are followed, and they also deal with the rights of individuals. So the Bill of Rights, our first 10 amendments, deal with the rights that individual have, and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution effectively apply the Bill of Rights to the states, because prior to the 14th Amendment, the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution, a lot of people don't know this, applied only to the federal government. But the 14th Amendment, and it's been since 1868, apply the Bill of Rights to states to say states can't do things. And if you read it very carefully, it says that in the 14th Amendment. It says no state shall. Okay. Now, the 60s brought a change in the courts. They changed from hands off, as they say, concerning due process in corrections, meaning that the courts before left the interpretation and execution laws to the states and the judges. And then some states use their own constitution, because states have their own constitution, but no constitution that is by a state can overrule a federal constitution. If there's a conflict, the federal is going to win all the time. So the belief is that individuals who are incarcerated gave up certain rights. However, you're going to discover that, just briefly, just looking at this, that starting with the First Amendment, dealing with the establishment of religion and speech, and the freedom of press and assembly, from 62, notice these decisions recognize the religious beliefs starting in 62, even dealing with the censorship of mail, permitted to the extent to maintain security, which means that the mail can be checked. And then going all the way around down to 2006. So policies that deny magazines, newspapers, and photographs to the most incorrigible residents in the prison system in an effort to promote security and complaints are constitutional. Let me show you what I mean. I had a case, and this actually was not a prison, but it was jail, but the same thing would apply in prison, where the correction officer was bringing in magazines to an inmate, and he was doing so far as I was able to determine innocently, and he would bring them to the inmate, and they were not pornographic magazines. They were all kinds of magazines, and the point of the matter is that there was a problem with that. I bet none of you probably know what the problem was. So I'll just tell you. These magazines, newspapers had been sprayed or either soaked in liquid drugs, and dried. And they were brought to the individual after they dried out and ironed them out. And the individuals got them, and they didn't read them. They didn't look at them. They chewed them, and they were getting high with that. It's smuggling drugs. But you'd never think of that one, would you? Yeah, but that's something that I learned as a lawyer defending this guy. But he did not know that that's what they were doing. But what he did, though, was violate the policies um, that to bring in magazines, newspapers, and things. So that got him in trouble. And the individuals who were charged with this got more time added to them because they violated it. And so thus, that's why, uh, and to maintain control there. So after learning that, it makes sense. Some people think about the thing about razor blades and things like that being smuggled in, but yeah, that's true too. But that one right there, I always remember this, and I've used this several times to explain to students. You'll be surprised how creative some of these people can get. Too bad that they don't apply those skills uh, in better ways to keep them out of jail. So the Fourth Amendment search and seizure issue, and dealing with starting in 62 conversations um, recorded in a jail visitor's room aren't protected by the Fourth. So you don't have any private conversations because, once again, maintaining security. You'll be surprised. And then warrantless search of a cell is not a violation. Um, strip searches can be carried out, and a cell can be searched without a warrant, and that's surprise. Again, this is to maintain control of the facility. And there were cases that came out in each of these. They don't provide them, but believe me, there are. Eighth Amendment dealing with cruel and unusual punishment. Um, Starting in 76, deliberate indifference to medical needs constitutes unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain. So, in other words, the inmates are entitled to medical treatment. And then, because it's humane, again, cruel and unusual punishment. Conditions of confinement in Texas prison system were unconstitutional based upon this case you'd have to look at. Double celling don't constitute cruel and unusual punishment. A person wants to be in a cell by themselves, but because of the um, ability to, spacing, they couldn't do it. A prison resident mistakenly shot in the leg during a disturbance is not suffering cruel and unusual punishment. And if the action was taken in good faith uh, to maintain discipline rather than the mere purpose of causing harm. And all the way down to 2003, regulations suspending visiting for 2 years for those who have flunked 2 drug tests do not constitute cruel and unusual punishment because, again, back to the point I was talking with the magazines and situations, um, there are drugs there. And drugs are found, quite a few are found in jails and prisons, especially. Okay. Then finally, we get to the 14th Amendment. Remember where I talked about where it says no state? There it is. The second state, no statement, no state shall make or enforce laws. So in 1968, Alabama used segregation in prisons and they said it's unconstitutional. And the reason why is because it is. People should have the opportunity in prisons to be around different individuals. Now, of course, though, applying that same rationale to individuals who are known gang members and to mix them is not going to violate the 14th Amendment because of the fact that, again, balancing the right of that individual to associate with whoever they want to and the control of the prison maintaining order is going to win every single time. And it goes all the way down, each of these instances, all the way down to 95. Prison regulations don't violate due process unless they place atypical and significant hardship on the resident. So these are just some. These are just some of the cases. Okay, so that's just an introduction to the rights and some of the rights that people don't have while they're in prison or in jail. So sentences can range from fines all the way to jail. And as you should know, jails are maintained by the city and county. Prisons, on the other hand, are maintained by the state and the federal government. Okay, and so it talks about the fact that there's shorter sentences that these individuals are in there, and intermediate sanctions are put in place to try to deal with the overcrowded issue, and they begin to give a person a chance to respond in a positive fashion. As it says, some clients on probation are required to report quarterly or less, while others may be required to be in contact with their PO, probation officer, several times a week. It depends on what the actual intermediate sanction that's imposed, such as dealing with drugs and alcohol treatment might require more. So when a person is sentenced, someone to probation, there's a court ordered condition set, and I told you one with probation challenge, and it could be as simple as fines and treatment. But failure to comply with this could mean other sanctions being added up, including bringing up the original sentence, which means you'd spend the rest of your time behind the bars. And at that time, the prisoner no longer have the option of being in the community and serve the remainder of their sentence, depending on the severity of offense. So it ranges from fines, and you can click on these. I'm not going to do that. To fines and restitution, community service. Community service is a big ticket where with community service, the goal is to bring the person to work with individuals that they may have committed the crime against. For example, some hate crime victims are attacked because of their race, sex, religion, or national origin. And so what happens is that the judge might, with the probation officer working, put you in a program to work with. Like, for example, if it was because of the race, the African American, you might be one that reports to NAACP or PUSH or some of those kinds of organizations. But the key thing is to have you to learn about the people and to benefit the community itself. Drug and alcohol treatment goes without saying. You get that treatment. And remember, as I've often said, that if a person has a drug and alcohol problem, none of these sanctions will benefit them unless you take care of that, because that's an illness. Day reporting centers where they report on a regular basis to individuals and see how they're doing. It could be employment, drugs, and so forth. Drug controls, we kind of cover that, the use of chemicals. But I don't particularly care for that because you border on a violation of cruel and unusual punishment. Is given person Depo-Provera, for example, in a sex case. That's a chemical castration. And then these other types of things, Prozac for depression. So this is a medical issue, but it's still partly one of them. Home confinement, everybody's familiar with that, where you can't leave except to go to work or school or something, and you'll have a GPS or electronic monitor on you. Shock incarceration, you're sentenced to jail, and sometimes, as they talk about, a prison term, but after a short period, the judge reduces the sentence because you learned your lesson. And then we finish it under some possible other intermediate sanctions. Boot camp. It's a kind of a shock treatment where you kind of treated as if you were in the military and you were in boot camp, and involve workouts, marches, drills, getting up early in the morning, making up your bed and all kinds of stuff. Basically what it does is it puts the individual in a position where they are told what to do, when to do, how to do, So if you can imagine a drill sergeant over you, that's something that sometimes it helps some of these individuals. Okay. So there's recommendations come pretty much from the probation officer, okay, working together with the courts. So now let's conclude by looking at the roles of probation officer. And you're going to discover as I go through this bit of information that it demonstrates, first of all, you're going to discover one thing. As the years went on, more responsibilities, and you evolve from a babysitting to a counseling situation, a counseling role that you played. And you were there as an advisor to that individual while they were under your control. And one thing that you should be aware is you cannot, in most jurisdictions, become a probation officer unless you have a bachelor's degree at a minimum, because you'll see in a few minutes. So let's take a look at this. So let's look at some of the roles. So it says that today the communities believe that probation officer is much like that of the police and charged with public safety, but it involves supervision and surveillance similar to law enforcement. However, the key with probation officers is to restore those individuals using evidence-based practices to deal with the skills of that individual and work as an agent with them. Get more specific in a minute. So over the last 30 years, this timeline shows you how it evolved. Notice, and I'm not going to go over every one, but I'm going to show you how it starts out at roughly in the 80s all the way to today, that these were some of the roles that you originally started out with. Now, keep in mind that these duties that I'm talking about back in 1980 did not go away as of today. Other duties were added on to them in the interim between that period, dealing with home employment, pre-sentence investigations. And the purpose of pre-sentence investigation is to learn about the history of the criminal background of a person before they are sentenced or given probation. Reports dealing with their violations, knowing how they have done, moving from one jurisdiction to another, because individuals might move So the probation officer had to deal with that. Pre-release investigations, and then court appearances and testifying when there were issues that relate to violations. When a person violates the terms and conditions of probation, the probation officer prepares a petition that results in a hearing and a VOP, which stands for violation of probation, and you go before that judge. And basically what it is they determine whether or not the offense that you committed or whatever issue that you violated, whether it was serious enough to send you to prison or jail, should I say. But the key thing that they always want to lean on is trying to salvage that individual, because remember, one of the key things about probation is that it helps to deal with the overcrowded issue. So the goal is that and then these hearings take place, and they are not determined by beyond a reasonable doubt, but the same as a civil court, by preponderance of the evidence. So moving on, so 16 years later, so the duties noted above plus these things were added. And you can see things like evaluating bail, the sentencing guidelines, dealing with determinations of helping to determine the fines. Remember, they recommend the judge makes the final decision. Client transport, program monitoring, community service work referrals, working with community service organizations, and then gambling assessments. Gambling is very detrimental, usually to a person on probation, because that can lead them back to crime and deeper in the prison or in the jail system. So remember the first things, this is added to it in 2009. Look at what happened. All the duties noted before, plus restitution to individuals, victim impact and neighborhood impact statements are being provided to determine the effect of your actions or violations. Assessments relating to the drug offender person, alcohol, DNA testing, violence assessment, all kinds of things. Remember, this is the probation officer who is involved with this. Motivational interviewing, trying to help that individual. Case planning, school district notifications, sex offender registration for individuals who are on probation that are sex offenders. Intensive supervision, where the individual will be under the supervisor, and they might have a combination of home confinement and things of that nature. Electronic monitoring, which we've already talked about, and diversion programming. And then finally, all the way today, it brings us to the duties that I previously provided, plus dealing with annual proficiency to see how individuals are doing, core correctional practice skills, dealing with effective reinforcement, effective disapproval, effective use of authority. The things that are basically what you're doing is you're using systems to determine how well that individual is adjusting to probation. The responsibility principle, the RNR, and you'll determine how that person is doing. You want to, again, rehabilitate that person and help them to rehabilitation. But how many people know you can oftentimes lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink? So you do the best you possibly can to give them positive motivation and guidance and assist them to continue down a positive road. Dealing with case planning, teaching providing services, as we've talked about that already, quality assurance, research outcomes, and data analysis. So understand the outcomes and analysis and how individuals are operating and how well they're doing. Those are all roles of that probation officer. So you can see then. So now dealing with them as a change agent. A change agent. Remember what that is. The probation officer is not only responsible for the public safety, but responsible for working individually to help them, provide them with skills and address what I talked about earlier, criminal thinking, so that they can begin to move in a new direction. That's what it means when it says they are a change agent. And that's the end of that. And then on your own, your vocabulary review. And you can go through that and take this little test. And a judicial policy of non-interference concerning internal administration of prisons. Um, Hands off. Is it right? Nope. That's what everybody goes for. Let's go back so you can see why it's not. I want you to see why it's not. Because I can see everybody looking at this and they say, oh, yeah, it's got to be a judicial policy. Judicial concerning the internal administration of prisons. Is it procedural due process or is it case law? Which one do you think? That's right. Remember, you're dealing with the courts. Ask when it tells you who you're dealing with. Cases, they deal with the cases. And then you go to the next one. The constitutional guarantee that no agent or instrumentality of the government will use any procedures other than those procedures prescribed by law to a what? Here you go. You're on a roll. And then you can go through and do the rest of these yourself. Okay. Any questions about anything? What do you think it is? You know, some of my colleagues have little tricky ways that they give their key phrases or words. My philosophy about key phrasing is to remind the student that they should pay attention from the very beginning of the lecture, because I generally will hit upon the topic many times. And you are absolutely correct. Very good, Lynn. Very good. You hit it. A probation officer. That's exactly, and you know, this was about probation. I could say probation or probation officer, but the reason why I wanted to say probation officer is because remember who's going to implement the process of probation for the benefit of the individual, and that is the probation officer. Very good, excellent, good observation, and good, excellent call. Well, give me probation officer and you get your points. Any other questions for tonight? Looks like none. Everybody's raring to go. I will see you not as of right now. Okay, that's like your line so far. Not so far. Right? Okay. I'm messing with you because a lot of students do that. Okay. So, nope. I will see you guys next week at 7 o'clock for our final lecture for this course. And I will cover weeks 5 and week 6 information. I'll do that in an hour and maybe go a little bit over because I want to make sure that you get the information for week 6 as well. All right. I will see you at that time. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your week. My body's kind of sore. I got 2 shots yesterday. I got the flu shot, and then I got my booster, Moderna. So I'm prime time. My body feels sore, but I'm prime. I'm gonna be okay. This too shall pass. So take care of yourself. See you next week. Good night.